Good morning and welcome back to the One Celtic Fans View this morning. There's lots to talk about this morning. There's fans protests. There is the signing of a player for free, and we'll dive into the depths of why he was really released by his team in Spain. And then there's the Europa League squad. The official squad has been announced by Celtic, and it's led to a lot of people raising their eyebrows this morning because Celtic have left out four of Brendan Rodgers' summer signings. Let that sink in for a minute. Or were they Brendan Rodgers' summer signings? We're going to talk about the board membership and why we cannot sack the board. So make sure you watch this video to the end. Jamal Simpson-Puzzi, Inamura, Shinya Mada and Callum Osmond have all been dropped from the European squad. Let's jump into the European squad first of all, just to get this one out of the way so that we can fully focus on the task ahead of trying to sack the board and why we can't ultimately sack the board. The squad for the Europa is Kasper Schmeichel, Sinisalo and Ross Dohan as the keepers. All fine, you're thinking. Yep. And then it gets interesting because even though he's out for 12 weeks, Alistair Johnston has been included in the Europa squad. That means Celtic think that they can get him back quicker than they can get him for the final couple of games of the Europa League phase. Then you've got Liam Scales, Austin Trusty, who's also injured. How long is he going to be out for? Cameron Carter-Vickers, Marcelo. Rio Hitati is named as a defender in this one, which is weird. Dane Murray, Tony Ralston and Kieran Tierney are the defenders. You're thinking, okay, bit strange that Rio is a defender, but never mind. And then you've got Luke McCowan, Arne Engels, Paolo Bernardo, Carla McGregor and James Forrest, all classed as midfielders at Celtic. And this is where it gets interesting. Excuse me. Benji, Michelangelo, Kelechi, Sebastian, Johnny Kenny and Daisen Maeda. It's an interesting one, isn't it? I mean, dropping Shinya Mada, and then you've got Brendan Rodgers as the manager. And that's directly from the Europa website, which I just think, I mean, Celtic will never find ways that cease to amaze us as fans. That is for sure. They always find ways. It's time for a change of the board, says Andy. Let's get that comment up because we're going to dive straight into it. It's time for a change in the board, says Andy O'Neill. Well, we can't. And I'm going to tell you why. As we all like to shout out, sack the board, and there has been two different organisations, well, quite a few different organisations, put out a statement yesterday asking for the board to answer questions. And I'm all for that, but sometimes it's good to take a step back and view everything that's going on. Great leaders over the time of history have always had the ability to step back from the mayhem. I'm going to tell you a story about back in the 1980s. We went camping. We were going to conquer Ben Lawyers as teenagers. And it was in October, during the October holidays. And we get up halfway and we're going around this mountainside heading towards Ben Lawyers. And we're way up to our waist in snow. So we goes down into a valley and we pitch tent. Now the tent's Celtic Park. Just take this into consideration. And we set up the tent, have food, zip down the tent door, we go to sleep. And we hear this noise in the morning. It's a noise that I've never heard before. And it's a complete rumbling. And I'm like, what on earth is that? And I look out the front of the tent and I don't see anybody. A bit like the board members maybe twitch the curtains at Celtic Park and they look out. There's nobody there. Don't care. But then I looked round the back of the tent and there was thousands upon thousands of deer coming running down the side of the mountain. And I'm looking at them and I'm thinking, wow. But everybody's running in the same direction and they're running along the floor of the valley and then buck up the other side of the mountain and away into the distant. And that's Celtic fans just now. We're all running together and we're all singing off the same hymn sheet, which is fine. But we can't just sack the board, because the board are made up of basically people that don't want to move their mates. When you look at the ownership, now this is when it gets interesting. The major shareholders at Celtic FC are Dermot Desmond with 34.6%. He's the largest individual shareholder. And then there is Linsdale Train Limited. Yeah, you got that right. Lindsell Trains Limited, a significant institutional investor. And then you've got Chris Traynor on 11%, holds a substantial equity. Then you've got John Kane, James Mark Kane is his official name. He's a major investor. Then you've got Tom Allison, Thomas Elderly Allison is his official name. And then you've got Dolman Fund Management. Then you've got Lombard Odier Asset Management Europe Limited. That's the major shareholders at Celtic FC. And then there's other notable shareholders. This is where it gets interesting. And it lets you understand why the Celtic board are in place to achieve the results that they can on a financial basis. And it's run like a corporate organisation the way that it is. You then have other institutional holders at Celtic. Barclays PLC, Private Investment Banking. HSBC, Global Asset Management UK. Schroeder Investment Management. Charles Schwab Investment Management. Evelyn Partners Investment Management. The Celtic Trust are way behind Peter Lawwell's shares. Let's put that into perspective. They're way behind even the amount of shares that Peter Lawwell has. When it's the chairman, Peter Lawwell, the chief executive that everyone wants rid of, Michael Nicholson, the only person that can sack him are the board members. And will the board members cry out for an incompetent leader? No, they won't, because they're all going to stick together. When you look at the other board members, you've got Chris Mackay, you've got Tom Allison, you've got Sharon Brown, independent non-executive. Dermot Desmond, independent non-executive director, largest shareholder. Brian Rose, independent non-executive director. Brian Wilson, you know him from his Labour thingies, and an independent non-executive. And Joanne McNairn, company secretary, which you've got to have. When you look at the percentage that these people have, and you then come to understand why there's no appetite for change at the board. Dermot Desmond, Irish investment company, long-standing non-executive director, principal shareholder since the 1990s, sits on the board. You know, although he isn't the owner, his stake makes him the most influential individual investor. And that's all he is. That's all he is. Linsdell Train, London fund manager. He's a London fund manager, concentrated on long-term holdings in consumer brands and sports franchises. He's been a top institutional investor with a significant vote in AGMs. He's seen as a supportive, stable, disciplined capital allocation rather than activist intervention. Chris Traynor, Glasgow-based advertising guru, entrepreneur, owned Forest Media Group. He had an exit strategy for his company. He built it up and sold it in 2018, giving himself a big chunk of cash. Banked some of it into Celtic. Not because he gets a great dividend, because ultimately it will see his share price go up and up and up. And then that's what people with money do. You know, they don't sit with money in the bank to get a shitty return. They don't put money into a savings account in a bank because it's not trusted. And this is the stark reality of where we are with Celtic FC, unfortunately. And this is, a lot of people might not like this video. It may be a wake-up call. And these are the people that have the most significant money in Celtic. And this is why you'd be as well banging your head against the wall when it comes to Celtic. James Mark Kane, the Edinburgh-based businessman who is behind the Wooden Mill and properties in Edinburgh, is a lifelong Celtic figure and former director. Following John Kane's passing, he obviously took up his shares. The Kane's family historic role in safeguarding Celtic's future from the 1990s. His stake is 6.2% in ordinary shares. And then you've got Tom Allison, Scottish businessman, independent director, chairs the Remuneration Committee. He decides how much they all get paid. He sits on that committee. And it's a closed shop. Dolman Fund Management are top holders at the table. Dolman Stockbrokers itself was acquired by a Cantor Fitzgerald Ireland in 2012. Big Irish connection and everything that we see, which is good. I'm all for it. But you've got to follow the money sometimes. Lombard Odier. This is a weird one. Who are these Swiss private bank asset managements that have a share in Celtic? Small, but institutionally positive in their shareholding in organisations. And then you've got other small shareholders that goes on, Barclays Bank, etc., which makes it hard. As much as you want to change, it makes it hard for people to sack the board. Now, whilst I think it's admirable that we all go in the same direction, I do think that sometimes it does take someone to step back from the mayhem that's ensuing and think that putting out a public letter, and I don't want to rain on anyone's parade, putting out a public letter. I'm old enough to remember my uncles and my fathers and his brothers and everything, and all the people that had strife through the miners' strike in the 80s. I lived through that as a kid. And when you have a collective amount of people all going in the same direction, is it the right direction sometimes? I've seen a lot of people online talking about the Celtic Trust and everything, and these were the same people online that were saying that Brendan Rodgers has walked. Guaranteed. The amount of people that I pulled up on that evening on Twitter, that it was done and dusted. Brendan Rodgers had left Celtic. It'll be announced in the morning. He's still here, and he won't be leaving. And then they're then calling for people with ordinary shares. And asking people with ordinary shares to hand them over to the Celtic Trust. People will not handle, and this is where I'm getting to with this video, is the fragmented nature of individual goals within what is going on at Celtic. Do you know, each individual organisation has their own agendas. And, do you know, it's great that they can all come under one banner. It doesn't generally work though, because at the background, they've got their own agendas. Celtic Trust has got its own agenda. Do you know, other organisations that were all involved in the last 48 hours all have their own agendas when it comes to Celtic. And we all know what the agendas are. And this is where it starts to fragment. The board will not look out the window to see a public letter on social media to Celtic. And this video, as it may come across as, Jesus, you're bursting our bubble. It's not meant to come across. It's just a bit of a reality check. And I sometimes think that as fans, we do really need to survey for what is happening in front of us. Now, whilst Brendan Rodgers won't need to speak to the media for another 8 days when he comes back, we need a restricted board that's transparent. If you've just listened to what I've said, you will not get that. If you've just listened to all the investors that are at the club with significant power, we will not get change. I'm sorry. I'm sorry to be the one that tells you. I'm sorry to be the one that pisses on people's parade. But someone has to come out with, look, what can really be achieved here? And right now, everyone running in the same direction and say, well, we'll make a statement. We'll make a public statement. That's not the way that you achieve stuff. Now, what I'm not for is people boycotting games, because that hurts the club. Now, people going down the road of coming off the home ticket cup scheme, and whilst I was for it at the beginning, and when you're in the midst of, when you look at being in the midst of it and trying to think about what is the best way forward, maybe sometimes that is the best way forward, but then it has an effect on the team if we don't turn up for European games. If we don't turn up for cup games, it has an effect on the team. It's effectively boycotting. Yes, determining when Celtic can pull cash straight out your bank is one thing, and coming off the cup scheme is maybe that. But isn't a better collective by all these organisations involved is to publicly come out and say, stop buying merchandise? Is that not a better way of doing it? The Celtic Trust, look, as much as you'll love it, the Celtic Trust are never going to get enough votes to get on the Celtic board. I've just listed all the organisations. Even Peter Lawwell has got more shares than what the Celtic Trust has. When you look at all these institutional investors that will stamp down on anything the Celtic, I'm just giving you a wake-up call. That's all I'm doing this morning. And I'm sorry if it's not going with the agenda that you'll think that we should be doing. Like I say, sometimes it takes for someone just to step back. Great leaders over the course of history have always taken a step back and been able to assess the field of play and then determine the best foot forward. All I'm saying is I think that a public statement isn't the best way forward. I think a cohesive saying to fans, maybe don't buy merchandise, when it hits them in the pocket, then you get them to stand up and take notice without boycotting games, because boycotting games is just not a way forward. And especially since we've dropped out players for the Europa squad. I'm still in Champions League mode. So anyway, Shin Yamada, Callum Osmond, Hateto Inamura and Simpson Puzzi. Simpson Puzzi, for me, will be sent back to Manchester now in the next transfer window, as his club will demand answers. I heard that Celtic Trust need 5% of shares to ask the board for any kind of explanations. They have something like 0.18 of a share. They will never get 5%. Go back and listen to the beginning of this video. Tom Allison, 3.5%. Dolman Fund, 2.5%. Lombard Audier, 1.75%. James McKean, 6.2%. Christopher Traynor, 11%. Linden Train, has been suggested that they have between 5.7 and 18%. Lots of other shareholders with way more clout than the trust will ever have. And I'm sorry. You know, Swiss bank investors with more clout than the Celtic Trust. That's the reality of the situation. And all I'm trying to do is give you the reality of what is the corporate governance of Celtic FC. Great club to be a part of. Amazing this business model. Fans should be happy that we're not spunking the cash and flops in Europe. Okay, it's a blip in Europe. It happens. Get over it and get behind our team. You know where I'm coming from, mate. You know where I'm coming from. You know, we do have to get behind the team, and we have to get behind them in big numbers and support the team. But I just think that we've missed an opportunity. We're missing an opportunity to have an immediate, direct impact on Celtic. And Celtic will know that. Celtic will know that. Because over the next 20 odd days before we get back to Celtic Park, 25 days or something, 23 days or whatever it is till we get back to Celtic Park, unfortunately, cracks will start appearing. It always does. Shame that the board are doing its best to get their own attention. Egomaniacs that are seeing being called incompetent will hurt them. Bangers game, good start. Have you consulted David Lowe? Surprised to learn that he's wasting his time on his strategy. No. Always find the manager and team. Exactly. And that's what we need to do going forward. And on that note, have an absolutely fantastic day. Make sure you join me at 8 PM Celtic Part Time tonight, where we could talk about this again, because there's nothing else to talk about. No, what we'll do is we'll talk about this Europa nonsense that Celtic have done and left out 4. I mean, who's left out the signings? Was it Brendan Rodgers? Did he put the team forward, obviously? Who really is in charge of Celtic? Have a fantastic day, Celtic fans, wherever you are, all around the world.